How you approach God will determine what you receive from God. Do you know, if you approach God in the wrong manner, and I'm not talking about in our holiness or anything like that, I'm talking about with our mindset. You know, you don't receive from God because of how holy you are, you receive from God by faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So when we approach God, we need to approach God with the right mindset, because faith allows you to receive from God. And, it's like, have you ever been down to the last bit of your butter in the house, and maybe the kids are looking toast, and then you've got lunches to make and different things. And when you're down to the last bit, you maybe forgot to get it that day, you're going to get it the next day. But here's the thing, when you're down to the last, you approach it different. You approach it with a skimpy mindset. You approach it just taking little at a time. And you're very skimpy with how you apply it, and if you make toast or whatever, you're very careful with it, because there's only so much of it. And you know that if you put on too much the night before, you're not going to have enough in the morning to get your toast or to get your lunches made or whatever. So you approach it with a skimpy mindset, with a small mindset. But you know what? When we approach God, if we approach God with that same mindset, with a small mindset, like God has only got so much to give, it will determine how much we receive from Him. Do you know, God's a good God, and God is an abundant God. He owns a kettle on 1,000 hills. And when we approach God, we're to approach God with a mindset of faith, knowing that He is full. Do you know, when Jesus walked this earth and He walked this planet, He didn't go about empty. He actually went about full. And people came and received from Him. People received their answers and received deliverance and received healings and breakthroughs and changed lives, all because He was full. In John 1 verse 16, it says, "Of His fullness have all of we received, and grace for grace." Grace is God's supply. And so when you take from God's grace, it never drains God's grace, because God is an overabundant God. So you can take from God's grace, and it's just like it replaces itself. There's grace for grace, for grace, for grace. It just keeps replacing itself. And I want to encourage you today that when you come to God, don't come to God with an egg cup mentality. Come to God with a truckload mentality and receive from Him. God wants you to be a good receiver. God wants you to come and receive from Him. So when you come to God, come in faith and receive of His goodness, receive of His love, receive of His grace. There's an abundant oversupply of God, and you know what? It's not a selfish thing. It's not something where we receive just to be selfish. That's not what it's about. We receive so that we have to give. And I'm not talking just in a financial arena here. I'm talking in every area of life. Money is a part of life. But you know what? It's not the only part of life. There's a lot more to life than money. I tell you, people need comfort, and people need peace, and people need joy, and people need answers. And people need to know how to deal with one another and how to deal with the affairs of life. But I want you to know that God is abundant, and there's an abundant oversupply of God's grace for your life. And grace is unmerited favor, which means you don't have to be good enough to receive this. This is something that God has given freely. Do you know what? He just freely gives it to us. But you have to receive it by faith. Faith accesses this overabundant supply of God's goodness and God's grace. So when you approach God with that mindset that God is full. You can come to God empty, but He'll fill you. You'll not leave empty. He'll fill you. And so when you come to Him, come with the mindset of that God is an abundant God, a God of oversupply, and that you can come and receive from His goodness today.